I look like 12 years old.
Yes.
Hey all, it's Starzy, and today I'm going to be doing my July wrap-up. And I usually film alone, but my boyfriend's decided to sit right in front of me.
Yeah.
This is not okay. See, now I can't remember anything I was going to say. This is what you've done. I think I actually read 20 books in July, so we could be here for a while. And if anyone's wondering what the hell I'm wearing, I am Spyro the Dragon. Because it is onesie weather. Okay, the first thing I read was a witchcraft book. I've been reading a lot of those recently, and I don't think I'm going to go into too much detail on them since it's a very niche thing. But this is one of my favourite ones I've read, Weave the Liminal by Laura Tempest Zakroff. And it's kind of more one that's about kind of like the theory of witchcraft and why people would become or call themselves a witch, and how you could practice that, or how that fits in with a modern life kind of thing. And I really liked the tone of it in general. I don't really tend to rate anything that's more non-fiction though, for the most part. There are some exceptions. Yeah, I will say it is one of the better ones that I have read, but yeah, it's not one that has like spells or any of that kind of practical stuff in it. Then I read a romance book. I actually mentioned this in my, what's it called? Media Freakout tag. So The Bride Test by Helen Huang, which is like the companion novel, the sequel to, what was the first one called? Kiss Quotient. And I really enjoyed this, although I didn't enjoy it as much as the Kiss Quotient. In The Bride Test, you have the main male character is autistic, and as part of that he thinks he can't love, and so he's never really had a girlfriend, but his mum really wants him to get married, and so she basically goes overseas and brings home a woman that she hopes will become his wife. And that's kind of the backstory, and Helen Huang is autistic herself. So it's one of those own voices stories, and you have that representation in the first book as well. And yeah, it was a really enjoyable romance for the most part, although a strange concept for me, the whole arranged marriage thing. Another book that I mentioned in my media book freakout, because it is one of my favorite things I've read so far this year, was Bunny by Mona Awad, which is really like a horror type novel where you've got a woman who is going to college doing writing, and there are these other women there who she finds very strange, and they all kind of dress similar, but I really want their clothes the way their outfits are described. And creepy stuff happens when she is welcomed over to their house one day, basically, and warnings for things like animal sacrifice, but otherwise this was just really weird and really enjoyable because I like weird horror stuff. So I did give that 5 stars. And oh, I gave The Bride Test 4 stars. Another witchcraft book, this is one that I picked up from a Mind Body Spirit Festival last year, and it's Basic Witches by Jaya Saxena and Jess Zimmerman. I actually talked about this in my most recent video that wasn't a vlog, because it's a book that I rated 2 stars, so it was in all the books that I have rated 1 or 2 stars. And this book's beautiful, like aesthetically, and like the illustrations in it. Where's an illustration? Like, they're all so pretty, and it's not like a terrible book outright. It's not really what I was expecting, because really it's kind of like a self-helpy book, more so than it is like a traditional witchcraft book. And I don't mean traditional like traditional style of witchcraft. I mean, like, I don't know, there's some strange stuff in here. Like I mentioned, as I said, I mentioned some of it in that video, but I don't know. It felt strange to me and silly. It just felt a bit silly. And so, yes. Then I read another witchcraft book, because the thing is that I had access to Scribd, and there were a lot of witchcraft books on Scribd, so we can blame that. But I read The Green Witch by Aaron Murphy Hiscock, which is all about green witchcraft, which is all about working with plants and things like that. It's not really a complete guide like it says, because, you know, it's a fairly short book, which is why I was able to get through it so quickly. And again, it's not one I rated, but like, it was decent for what it was. I think there were even like some cooking recipes in there. I can't remember what I saved from it. I also read Pagan Portals, Australian Jewellery by Julie Brett, which is another witchcraft related book. This is the only book I've read that is related to the Southern Hemisphere, because obviously I am in Australia, whereas most books that are related to witchcraft and pagan stuff is all to do with like England and America is usually where a lot of those originate. So a lot of it isn't relevant to me, particularly when it comes to like seasonal stuff. And also the thing, I didn't love this book, but the thing I did also particularly appreciate about it was that it mentioned like specifically Australian fauna and flora, which, you know, I had never seen before. So like correspondences of animals like the kangaroo and trees that traditionally grow here and things like that. Then I don't know how many things I read related to witchcraft. I think there is a scary amount in here. Because then I read WTF is Tarot and How Do I Do It by Barbara Wintner, which is the kind of book that a lot of people I think are not going to like, just because it's that stereotypical millennial tone to it, which I really jive with as a millennial. Like, you know, she would speak about the king of, I don't remember which suit, and, or no, not even the king, the prince, which she referred to as the sun, or the jack. I can't remember the tarot. I clearly do not know very much about tarot, but she referred to like one of the cards as an F-boy and things like that. But I thought it was a really interesting perspective on tarot, and I found it, if nothing else, enjoyable to read because of that. I then looked through an art book that I've looked through before, which actually has a lot of stuff written in it, and that's the Art of Fable Legends, which is actually a game that was never released, which makes me very sad, because the Fable series, Fable franchise, is one of my favorite ever. This was meant to be like a 4v1 multiplayer game, and I even played the beta of it and things like that, and it just never came out. But this book was released despite that. But the thing that makes it particularly sad is like all throughout it there's, you know, things written in it, and it'll often refer to, you know, this is why we did this for the game and we can't wait for you to see it in game, which just makes it all the more sad. But there are like just some really interesting designs here, and I love seeing concept art and all of that kind of stuff. And again, you get that kind of insight into why they did certain things or why certain characters are portrayed certain ways. So I love this. It's one of my favorite art books, but yeah, not a game that we're ever going to see, unfortunately. Then I have an arc I read through NetGalley, which was Secrets of the Witch, an initiation into our history and our wisdom by Elsa White. I did rate this only because it was an arc. As I said, I don't usually really rate more non-fiction stuff. I gave it 3 stars. Basically what this is again, it's a really lovely book in terms of the illustrations. Like, you know, every page is illustrated and it's really beautiful from that perspective. And this book is basically an introduction to the history of witchcraft, and then there's also a section at the end which is correspondences. So it mentions a few crystals and things like that, which I found to be kind of jarring and unexpected, because it was history, and then all of a sudden there was this tiny section that switched from that. So that felt a bit weird to me. But beyond that, because it's the type of book it is that is largely illustrations with like little bits of text throughout it, there isn't a lot of information, and that can be a problem when it comes to things that are historical, because they give you this tiny perspective on things which don't kind of tell you everything that actually was the case or could have been the case. I mean, this is the, you know, the historian and history teacher in me coming out that this is the problem I had with the book. But yeah, particularly because there were some figures mentioned in here, like mythological witches and things like that, that were briefly mentioned, and it made me go, oh, that's not really the whole story, or that's not always how that individual is portrayed. But it's still good for being like an introduction. Like, as long as you understand that it is kind of an introduction and it's not really telling you the whole history, like, I think it can still be good from that perspective, and then it can show you kind of different things that you could then go on to and look at in more detail. Yeah, that's basically my feelings. So it's not horrible, it's just very basic in a lot of ways, I felt. Then I read like one of the most hyped romances that I've seen around recently, and one of my internet friends that I've had the longest kept telling me to read it as well, and that was Radiance by Grace Draven, which I gave 3 stars. So now we're getting into the books that I actually read during my vlogs. So they're things I've mentioned before. But this is a fantasy romance where, again, it's an arranged marriage, but this time it's 2 individuals from different races and it's like a political marriage. And you've got a human woman, and then you've got this man who's from this race where they've got like grey skin, pupilless gold eyes, sharp teeth, and like claws and all this kind of stuff. And from the get-go, the couple like can't stand the sight of each other, like they think that they're hideous, and that's where we start from. But at the same time, it's definitely not like an enemies to lovers thing, it's a friends to lovers. And I think that's part of the reason I didn't love it, is because there was no real banter or anything like that, other than them just calling each other ugly. And also, I don't know, I didn't really care that much about everything that was going on in terms of like the kind of political fantasy elements. I don't know, it wasn't a bad book, I just like wasn't in love with it like everyone else I've seen seems to be. Then I read The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. This is another thing that I had an arc of through NetGalley, and this is definitely out now, and it's been getting many high reviews. That's not really the term I'm trying to say, but it's been getting a lot of good reviews, and it's been getting a lot of hype since it came out recently, and I did really enjoy it. I think I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. We're following this woman who's living in this town, in this society that is very heavily run by a religious presence, and you've got this man who's in charge of everything, and it very much explores treatment of women as well as kind of corruption of religion and things like that. And then you've also got creepy witch stuff going on, obviously The Year of the Witching. So it's a horror in that way. So it's exploring a lot of interesting things, and you've got all the spooky elements, and the atmosphere is great of like the spooky forest. And I did really enjoy it for the most part and thought it was really interesting. I think it was just that it wasn't something that like grabbed me, that I was always wanting to immediately pick up over anything else, but I did really enjoy it and enjoy the way it explored certain themes. Although there are definitely things that some people might want to watch out for, like, I mean, one, it's, you know, can be very violent at times, and the women are treated horrible, and there's also things like death in childbirth and things like that. But yeah, really interesting, spooky read overall. I also listened to The Worst Best Man by Mia Sosa, which is a romance I ended up giving 4 out of 5 stars. Not that I think it's like the most high quality, best thing ever, but it was just really enjoyable to listen to, just a fluffy romance like that. And in this one, a woman was engaged and then was basically stood up on the day of her wedding, and instead of the husband kind of cancelling the wedding, he got his brother to do it, the worst best man, and he gets kind of blamed for it. And then years down the track, the best man and the shunned fiancé end up having to work together, and things kind of go from there. And there's a lot of banter in this because obviously there's kind of that conflict between them to begin with, and all that kind of stuff, and it was just fun. Really, it was just fun. There was also the interesting perspective of the culture of the female love interest too. I also read an arc of the ABCs of Black History, which is a picture book, a rhyming picture book. I love rhyming picture books. I gave this 5 stars. And it's a rhyming picture book that goes through the alphabet, and each letter corresponds to a word related to Black history, particularly like American Black history. So it is educational as well as just kind of fun in a lot of ways. And then it's also really good because at the back of the book it has a section that kind of goes into more detail about all the things that have been mentioned throughout it. So I really liked that. And it's also, you know, lovely illustrations. And I listened to Diamond Fire, which is a Hidden Legacy novella. We should know now. I really like Hidden Legacy urban fantasy series. This one is from the perspective of one of the sisters rather than Nevada, who we followed in the first 3 books. And so it was really interesting to see it from another perspective. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And yeah, I really enjoy the characters in this series and the family. And so even though you're following a different character, obviously you're still in the same family and it's a member of the family, and I love all of them. They're really interesting characters and there's lots of interesting stuff going on, and you know, lots of different powers and things like that, since that's kind of the main premise of Hidden Legacy, is that you've got people with different powers in the society, essentially. And yeah, can't really say much about it because it would be mega spoilers for the earlier books, but it was fun for just a little novella. The Witch Doesn't Burn in this one by Amanda Lovelace was a poetry collection that I read. Modern poetry like this probably isn't really my thing, but there were a lot of things explored in this poetry that I kind of related to, you know, because it's one of those things, and kind of the treatment of women in society and things like that get brought up. I do like my traditional rhyming poetry though, I think I've decided after reading this. So I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. There was also a poem that was just like the same sentence repeated over like 3 pages, which, I mean, sure. Then I read Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. So this isn't something that I rated, it's non-fiction, but I think it's a really good book by Rennie Edo Lodge. And this is obviously a book about race, and it is specifically looking at things from a British perspective. So it talks about personal experience and also history of Britain and other stuff that's gone on there. So I definitely learnt some things, and I think so it's just one of those really kind of valuable things to read, especially if you are someone who has kind of no clue about things like that, because a lot of people definitely do. And it is the time, with everything that's been going on in the world recently, I think people need to educate themselves. Getting close to the end. Read Grimoire of a Kitchen Witch, An Essential Guide to Witchcraft, another witchcraft book. I didn't love this one. I spoke about it in a vlog. It kind of ignored secular witchcraft and tried to say that all witches believe a certain things, which isn't necessarily true, so I don't like when books do that. And also it kind of just briefly went over a whole heap of different subjects that weren't necessarily directly tied together, and so it wasn't what I wanted. Doesn't mean there's not things there to pull out, though, that are just helpful, but they're the issues I had. I also listened to Dear, how do we say this name? Iawele? A Feminist Manifesto in 15 Suggestions, which is a letter that she wrote to her sister, I think, about raising her niece. And this is written by the woman who did the TED Talk called Why We Should All Be Feminists, which I watched years ago now, and I think she has a lot of good stuff to say. I thought this was a really good little thing. And again, yeah, you can also read Why We Should All Be Feminists in book form, I believe, and she's got some other things out that I'll probably get to at some point. I think it is really good, and yeah, I talked about that a bit more in my vlog as well. Then I think there's only one other thing here, which again, I talked about in my vlog, but it was the last thing I finished in July. But I read Pet, which is, I don't know whether it's classed as a children's book, like middle grade, or a YA, because it's definitely written younger, and I've seen it classified as both. Like in my library, I read it through a library app, and in that it was definitely classified under children's book. But the main character is like 16, I think, and we're in this kind of utopian society where at some point monsters were driven out by angels, monsters just referring really to bad people, and angels referring to the people who drove them out and upheld justice and things like that. And so this book kind of has a lot of things to say about society, and the main premise of this is that maybe not all the monsters are actually gone. And so this girl, along with Pet, is having to seek out and try and get rid of the monster, basically. The thing I found about this, I think I gave it 3.5. I thought it was a good book, but again, I'm not sure what age group it's actually for, and it definitely reads very young for the most part, but there's it's got such dark themes, especially when you look at, like, you know, obviously there's a monster in this book. Why are they a monster? Because the monsters are actually people who do horrible things. So it's got some very dark stuff, but in this young way, and it feels jarring at points. I don't know. It's one of those books that I have a hard time kind of articulating exactly how I feel about it, but it's not a bad book, but there's some of my kind of ideas on it. And also something I didn't even mention in my blog is that the main character is also a trans girl, and it's nice to see in this society that that's like, it's not an issue, it's not a thing. Whereas a lot of books, when you have like all kinds of queer rep, often books that feature some kind of queer rep, it's somewhere in there is about kind of the struggle of it. So it was nice to see in this book that it was just kind of an accepted thing, and there wasn't any struggle in that regard. It was just other stuff going on. And I think that's everything I read.
Yeah.
Can I help you? Is this your video? Did we watch any movies last month? Shrunk. I can't remember. Apparently
1917.
No, that was the month before. We watched 3 movies. I have them logged in my letterbox.
Oh my goodness.
Do you remember what we watched on the first day of the month? If the fact I'm laughing about it gives you any clue. So we watched 3 movies last month. The first thing we watched was 365 Days. Oh. I was talking to Willow about that this week as well. It's a freaking weird movie. But basically, this was the romance movie that everyone was talking about when it first came on Netflix. And it is something. It is something. It's not good. It's not good. But then the way it ended, it'd be good, like, what? It can't just end like that. Like, what? And my little sister was apparently looked into it because she couldn't stand the way it ended, and so now I know what's actually meant to have happened there. But anyway, it was interesting, and now I can say I've watched it and I know what everyone was talking about. I didn't rate anything above 2 stars of the movies we watched, so we've clearly watched some great things. The other thing, the second movie we watched was Blade Trinity, which I really like the Blade movies overall, but Blade Trinity is not good. Yeah, it's the third movie from the Blade franchise, and Blade's great because vampires and blood and spooky things, and it's also the movie that kind of paved the way for the major run of comic book movies we have now. But yeah, by the third one doesn't feel like a Blade movie. Like, there's like no gore in it, whereas the other ones are really like gross and gory. Like, there's barely even blood. Everything just explodes into like dust instead. And it also just has a completely different tone, which I think is partially because of Ryan Reynolds and the fact that he basically is just Deadpool. Like, I'm not sure if he acts or if it's just Ryan Reynolds in every movie he's in, to be completely honest. Yeah,
Yeah.
I gave it 2 stars. Not not a, like, I don't know. Doesn't feel like Blade, and it's not a great movie. But do you have anything to add? What are your thoughts on Blade? Rather than just saying yeah in the background. No? Nothing to add? You don't have any thoughts? Do you think Blade's a good movie?
Maybe when I was like 14.
When you're 14. I was probably like 14, 15 when I watched them for the first time too. And the other thing we watched was The Old Guard. Which you liked The Old Guard, didn't you?
What one was that?
The Old Guard was the one with, what's her name? Oh, I can't remember her name. She's in the one who's in Mad Max.
Oh, that's right.
Charlize Theron, is that her name?
I have no idea.
Anyway, a new Netflix action movie that I thought was really boring. But you liked it, didn't you?
What's this?
The Old Guard. You liked that movie.
It was alright. Something to watch.
It was alright. Yeah, I thought it was boring, but there you go.
Yeah.
So they were the 3 movies we watched, and I didn't like any of them. What else did we watch? Still watching Supernatural. Did we watch anything else last month? Since you're here, can you at least be helpful? Did we watch anything else last month?
Yeah.
Are you sure? Are you really sure? As in like TV, not just movies. Like they were the movies we watched. We watched Supernatural. We're still watching Supernatural.
It's literally that. Supernatural's been the last month.
Yeah, but sometimes we put... Oh, that was the other thing. I even mentioned that in my vlog. We did watch some of friggin' Cursed. Which wasn't good either. So
We didn't even watch it.
I was watching it.
You weren't.
Yes, I was. Friggin' chick from 13 Reasons Why. In...
So that's what she's from.
Yeah, she's in 13 Reasons
I
Why.
couldn't put my tongue in it.
The fantasy, new Netflix fantasy series is like Fae. And nobody likes the Fae. Or at least there are people who are trying to eradicate them all. And it's a weird, because it feels like a kid's fantasy, but then it's also really bloody. So clearly you are no help, because you don't remember anything that we watch.
Yep.
I think that's it then. Or did I play any games last month? I probably did, but I don't remember. Was I still playing Fable? I might have still been playing Fable. Which I finished the main story of Fable. So, now we're moving on. But anyway, yeah. That is everything that I read and watched in July.
Yeah.
Yeah. My tea is kind of cold. We're also like just completely stuck in our houses now because our city has so many restrictions that have been put in place in the past couple of weeks. So yeah, so nothing else interesting has happened. That's pretty much just been my life, reading and playing games and watching stuff. Oh, I also watched Shira. These are things again that I mentioned in vlogs already. I also finished Shira, and I like Shira. It's colourful and fun and wholesome with lots of diverse representation. But anyway, yeah, that will be it for today. So stay safe, stay educated, and Starzy out. What are you laughing at, huh? Huh?
Is that your thumbnail?
I'm trying to get a thumbnail. Ah! Here.